Good afternoon, my friends. This is for you if you are a little farther down the road in your process of neuroplastic recovery from chronic illness and you find yourself, or even if you're in the first 6 months, but you find yourself either seesawing back and forth a lot around certain, with certain fears or patterns, going dramatically from one end to the other, or just feeling plateaued, feeling very stuck, and like you're not making any progress anymore. Things have kind of ground to a halt. Or if there's certain areas where you know that you're stuck, you can feel it. It's not just a plateau. You're like, okay, I've got this fear or this limiting belief, but I don't really know what to do with it. This is for you. This is kind of a mini workshop, so this one's gonna be a little longer. This is about getting curious. The hardest part of shifting our beliefs in this process is that our vulnerable and protective parts, our limbic system, and these protective parts of us, are human parts, and we come at them from a place of trying to force them to change or not being empathetic. We come at them from a place of fear or punishment or why can't I get past this already, frustration. Then we kind of encourage our protective parts to become even more protective. If I come at you kind of in a condescending tone and, well, why don't you just change? And what's wrong with you? Why won't you just change your mind? That sort of thing. That kind of approach, that kind of energy is going to make it harder to actually work with these parts. So the number one thing when we're wanting to change our beliefs in recovery is to approach ourselves with a lot of compassion, because these beliefs that we have that are limiting us in this journey have been created by real, very unpleasant, unsafe feeling experiences that we've had. Most of our limiting beliefs come from experiences that we've had in the past and that shaped so many of our beliefs as human beings are shaped by our experiences. So compassion is the appropriate response to that. So this is about creating beliefs that support recovery, that allow for recovery to happen. The first thing I want you to understand with this is that most of us, I think probably all human beings, most of us have opposing beliefs somewhere in our psyche. And what happens is it's kind of like if you've got one belief going this way and you got another belief going this way and you're right in the middle. It's not a nice place to be. Not only are you stuck, that doesn't feel good. That kind of tension feels awful. So what some really common examples of this could be, okay, you believe that recovery is possible, but somewhere inside of you, you also believe that it's too hard for you. So once you start getting some momentum going and you're like, yeah, and you're watching recovery stories, you're pumping up your belief that it's possible, but then when you start actually taking those actions, your limbic system pops in with but it's too hard for you. You can't do this. They can do, but you can't. It's too difficult. You're too different. You're just not as competent as the other people, whatever it is. Or something else that, comes up a lot is that, okay, this is limbic. It's just my brain. I'm safe. These symptoms are not a threat. They don't mean anything's wrong. Till there's a certain level of intensity or perhaps amount of time that intensity is really high for, at which point the brain's like, nah, and then it's like, okay, well, but if it's that bad for that long, it's not limbic, something's definitely wrong. So we can have these patterns where it's like we kind of get part of the way up the hill and then just keep sliding back down. So I'm going to give you first just a couple of beliefs that are really helpful that I chose at the beginning of my recovery that really allow for recovery. And again, this is your brain, your life. You get to decide if you want to believe these things, but they're very helpful rules of thumb, also just for choosing beliefs that allow for recovery to happen. One of the first things I came to in my journey it's a really, really helpful belief is to only believe in things that bring life to your body. Meaning that if you come across a thought or a concept or a perspective, and when you read it, there's a sense of, oh yeah, that feels true. Like there's an aliveness, or there's an empowerment, or there's a relief. There's a like, oh, okay. When you really consider that as true, it's like, oh, something in your body relaxes and feels safe. That's a really helpful way to look at beliefs, more as currents of energy versus this conceptual, is it true or not, where it's an idea in the mind and we're really putting it up to this very two-dimensional measuring stick of, is this a true concept? It's very unhelpful, but that's usually how we think of beliefs as, is it true or not true? Here we want to look at, does it allow for us to get into relaxation? Is it life-giving or not? Because if we believe something that chronically puts us in fear, in despair, in disempowerment, in a place where we feel like there's no point in being alive, that's something that we can't really move past. If we're consciously choosing to believe those things, we're going to stay in that place, and it's not going to allow our brains and bodies to move towards wholeness. So that's a really helpful first belief that allows things to move forward. Another one is just understanding that fear is not chronic fear, like ongoing chronic fear is never helpful. Understanding that, sitting with that, looking at it, examining it. This is something I did at multiple points in my journey, was just kind of like, just almost like sitting there with a Rubik's Cube and just going like this a bajillion times over and being like, is there any circumstance in which being this scared for this long is ever going to help me in my life? And after thinking about it and going over it, I was like, no, like, some fear is catalyst. It's often a time, it's a sign we need more information, we need to take more action, but just ongoing fear, it burns up our body's resources, it turns off our logical thinking, our creative minds, our ability to access love, connection, meaning, motivation. It kind of destroys everything we need to be alive, really, and be able to actually successfully go through challenging situations. So that's something as well to sit with, because a lot of times we haven't really examined our beliefs about fear, especially if fear is something that's stopping us. And that's very connected to the third one, which is that it's an unconscious belief that most of us have that fear is a rational response to perceived danger. If something's scary, I should be scared. Like if something might be dangerous, if the symptoms I'm experiencing might be dangerous, then I should be scared and my fear is justified. That's something I see a lot in this work that I do in coaching is that, and I found it in my own brain too, of course. And the reality is that that's not actually, that's a limbic survival response. It's not rational. A rational response to perceived danger is to get more information and then take action on that information. And it's competence, not being overly careful and cautious and scared. It's a great clip I saw last night by Tom Cruise, because he's one of those people who just like he takes yes for an answer. Like there's no taking no for an answer anywhere, and fear is not obviously part of his life in a lot of ways. And he just said, don't be careful, be competent. And I'm like, yeah, that was kind of where I've arrived at after doing all of this work. So that's really a rational response to fear, is to get more information and then take action on that information. A really helpful thing to know with this is part of what allows these things to work is accepting how much is not in our control, as well as accepting death, which I know is a big, heavy thing. But for a lot of situations that people come up against, especially if you're someone who's connecting with me and still watching this video, my journey and the people I work with tend to have some pretty big life situations going on in recovery. It's a pretty common thing, or just really, really deeply embedded fears. And a lot of them are around fear of death. It's a really common human limbic fear that pretty much everybody needs to overcome in order to recover. So if we can't accept our mortality, or we can't accept the things that are outside of our control, and we're still trying to find safety through control, none of these things are really going to be able to take their full hold. So those are some helpful preliminary beliefs. And when you find a stuck fear, when you're working with yourself, you're trying to use your tools, you're finding these patterns still running under the surface, still running in the background, maybe in the foreground, of fear of symptoms, or trying to control other people or outcomes or circumstances or the future or your recovery, it's really the first step is approach that part of you with compassion and curiosity. The key here is to make your intention to know yourself instead of to change yourself. That's the hardest part, because none of us like being stuck in that tension and that pull. It's an awful feeling. And if you're anything like me, at least, you're going to want to just like make it go away, just like beat it with sticks until it disappears. And there's a softening of, oh, this is a tender, vulnerable part of me that's been wounded at some point and is still scared and doesn't know how to let it go on its own. So let me be curious where this came from. And there's a couple questions that you can do. And part of that softening is just somatic. When you sit down to do inquiry work with yourself, soften your body posture. Take a deep breath, especially into your back body. We tend to, when we're in survival mode, we tend to clench forward and hold a lot of tension. We brace with our abdomen. We clench, we're breathing really shallow. We're gripping with our toes and our knees. Our shoulders are hunched and up near the ears. So making a conscious effort to try to breathe into your diaphragm, breathe into your ribs, breathe into your back, relax your stomach as much as you can, try to wiggle your toes, relax your shoulders. And either you can do this out loud or in a journal when you notice these fears. And it can be helpful to do this when you're feeling stuck, like when you've reached a point of impasse where you're like, okay, well, I can't do any more practices because my body will not relax. Like no matter how hard I try to redirect or do somatics or do visualization or whatever, this is just kind of spinning, or it's chaos, or it's stuck, or whatever. And a couple things. And I really want to highlight that these questions are meant to help you understand the reality this part of you that's scared is living in. We're not taking these answers as the actual literal truth. We're just understanding what this thing is looking at, because a lot our parts are looking at worlds that we are out of touch with, and that's why they're so stuck, because they're kind of looking at, well, there's a tiger right there, I can't go that way. But we just experience the fear and the stuckness. We're not aware of what these parts are looking at. So the first question that's really helpful is, what would happen, asking this part curiously, like you would a child, and take the answer about as seriously as you would a child. What would happen if we let go of this fear or this belief? Because that's going to, like, usually the part, it'll be something awful and terrifying, like I will die, or I will lose everyone I love, or everything in my life. I'll be completely alone and my life will have no meaning, or something, usually something bad, and usually something pretty drastic. Not always, but oftentimes it is. Otherwise this part wouldn't be creating so much freeze or so much fear or so much resistance and trying to protect us from this awful thing happening if it wasn't really awful. So then you can get curious about, okay, well, why might I believe that? Where might that have come from? Where might I have learned that in my life? And again, the first goal here is just to say, okay, I hear you. I understand. Yeah, that is scary. I'm right here. It's okay. And that's not true. But it's okay that you don't understand that yet. It's okay. And another question you can ask is, what could this fear be protecting me from? And that goes along the lines of disappointment. Like if we make that leap of faith to believe that we can recover, and we try and then we fail, it's like for a lot of us, we've tried so many things, we cannot possibly face that feeling of disappointment. We don't have enough bandwidth, enough safety, enough regulation to face that. So a lot of times these parts will stop us from progressing because we're afraid of failure, and it's like, I can't let you potentially even feel that failure. Or it's a fear of being re-traumatized, or a fear of loss of some kind. Those are really, really common. Just due to the nature of YouTube videos and time, the sake of time, I might make another video to go into that. But these are the first things to start working with, is just start to understand and have compassion, and understand that your beliefs create your reality. So you can ask yourself as well, especially if you know what experiences you've had that created these beliefs, am I willing for my entire trajectory of my life to be run by these experiences, by what's happened in the past and the beliefs that's created? Or am I willing to go out on a limb and say, I know my beliefs create my reality. They create what our minds perceive as possible. And so therefore what options our limbic systems will allow us to pursue, and actions that it will allow us to take and see as rational. And you can choose a new belief. And you can you can just keep living in that belief until it becomes a solid reality. You don't have to keep the old reality you've been living in. You don't have to keep the reality that was created by the way life has treated you, or the things that have happened to you in the past. You don't have to keep that. It's still living in your body right now, but you don't have to keep it. So the next action step to close this out would be to pick that new belief. Ask yourself, does it allow for me to recover? Do I believe that there is a solution? Do I believe in myself? Am I willing to give myself the chance to be stronger than I could have imagined? To be more competent, or more intelligent, or more persevering, more creative, more lovable, more worthy than I've previously believed? Am I willing to give myself a shot at that? And if I did, if I stepped into that, if I believed that, how would I feel? It's the most important one. Beliefs are just vibrations. They're feelings. They're realities we embody. The feeling is the most important part. How would I feel? Write down 1 to 4 descriptions. I would feel calm. I would feel free. I would feel empowered. I would feel happy. I would feel relaxed. I'd feel at ease, whatever it is. Write that down. And I want you to know, it doesn't matter how you get into that feeling. You could get into that feeling by doing Sematics. You could get into that feeling by listening to certain songs, or watching certain movies, or looking out at the birds flying around in the trees outside the window and the freedom that they have. It doesn't matter. You don't need to connect the belief in your conscious mind with the feeling in your body. Just the feeling in your body is enough. But you can also add to that, so what would I feel? What would I think if I really believe this? What would my thought life look like? So you can swap your thoughts out when you notice the old thoughts popping up. What would I say to myself and others? That one's really key. What we say out loud shows what we believe on the deepest level. And what would I do? What actions would I take? Write those things down for if you believe the new life-giving belief. And then throughout the day, each day, if you're willing to make that leap of faith and have that act of courage, keep lining up how you feel, what you think, what you say to yourself and others, and what you do with that new belief. Bye, guys.